Welcome back to the deep dive. We have a stack of reports on the desk today that, honestly, it reads like a piece of speculative fiction.
Oh, absolutely. Something out of a political thriller, maybe.
But it's very real. We're looking at a country that feels like a riddle, wrapped in a contradiction. It's like they took every political ideology, threw them in a blender, and just poured out something completely new.
It really is. It's one of those case studies that just breaks every rule in the standard political science textbook.
Right.
I mean, usually we look for patterns. This is a democracy. That's an autocracy. This is a market economy. That is a command economy. But Waikiki, it just refuses to be categorized.
Because if I list the specs on paper, you've got a constitutionally protected free press, a democratically elected parliament, a seat on the UN Security Council, and a spot in the G9.
Okay, sure.
You're picturing a standard Western liberal democracy, maybe somewhere in Scandinavia.
Naturally, that's the profile.
But then you flip the page and you see that the official head of state holds the title of dictator. Not president for life, not supreme leader, but literally dictator. And they have a nuclear arsenal, a completely cashless economy, and a sovereign reserve fund of $25 trillion.
It's a jarring mix. Today we're unpacking the socio-political model of Waikiki. And the phrase that keeps coming up in the research, the term they use themselves, is pragmatic synthesis.
Which sounds a bit like a euphemism for we make it up as we go along, doesn't it?
Well, maybe a little. But if you look at the Constitution, it's actually incredibly calculated. Most countries try to fit into a box. Waikiki seems to have looked at all the boxes, smashed them apart, and built a custom container using only the parts that work.
They don't care about ideological purity.
Not at all. They care about the output.
So let's start with the most glaring contradiction, the one that probably made everyone pause. The dictator. It's such a loaded word.
It is.
In the West, it's synonymous with tyranny, oppression, the suspension of rights. But the sources suggest that in Waikiki, they're using it closer to the original Roman definition.
That's the perfect analogy. And it's absolutely crucial for understanding how this place functions.
Okay.
If you go back to the Roman Republic, a dictator wasn't a villain. It was a magistrate given extraordinary power for a specific emergency or to provide focus when the Senate was bickering.
Right.
In Waikiki, dictator is a formal constitutional job title. It's not someone who sees power in a coup. It's a role defined by law.
But the notes say they're appointed for an unlimited term. That sounds pretty authoritarian to me. As a voter, it sounds like I have zero say.
It does on the surface.
Yeah.
But here's the nuance, and this is key to the whole model. The dictator is not an absolute ruler. We have to separate the title from the function.
How so?
Their power is strictly constrained by the Constitution. They can't just wake up and decide to ban the color blue or throw their enemies in jail because they feel like it.
Right. The reports do say they cannot unilaterally change laws. And they can't override court decisions.
Exactly. So they're not above the law. And they must respect fundamental rights like property ownership and freedom of speech. Think of the dictator less like a tyrant and more like a permanent strategic CEO of the nation.
A CEO.
Yeah. Their job is the long-term vision-looking 20, 30 years down the road, while the day-to-day stuff is handled by the democratic machinery.
Which brings us to the democracy part of this hybrid. Because there is a president and there is a parliament, and they aren't just rubber stamps.
No, not at all. They have real teeth. This is where the synthesis comes in. You have a president elected by the people, leading the executive branch. They manage the 20 ministers, the bureaucracy, the daily grind of government.
And then you have the parliament, a two-chamber system with a Congress and a Senate.
Right, and the Congress is interesting. 100 members, elected via online voting every 5 years. But the critical part, as you'd expect, is the power of the purse.
That's the check on the dictator.
That's the check. Parliament passes the laws and approves the budget. The dictator can have a grand vision, we need to go to Mars. But if Parliament doesn't sign the check, the rocket doesn't launch.
So it prevents that Mad King scenario.
It forces the strategic leader to actually convince the elected representatives.
Speaking of kings, we can't ignore that there's also a monarch, just to add another layer.
I know it does seem excessive, doesn't it?
A dictator, a president, a parliament, and a king.
But the king here is purely ceremonial. The Constitution describes him as sacred and inviolable, which is just fancy legal speak for you can't touch him, but he can't touch the laws.
So he's a symbol of national unity.
A symbol, a nod to tradition. It separates the dignified part of the state from the efficient part.
So you have a dictator for strategy, a president for execution, a parliament for legislation, and a king for vibes.
A king for vibes. I like that.
It sounds like a recipe for gridlock. You'd think they'd spend all day arguing over who does what.
You would think so. But the data shows it's incredibly stable. The sources all point to the transition of power in 2017 as the ultimate stress test. Parliament appointed the new dictator. It wasn't a coup, it was a vote.
And looking at the rules, if a dictator resigns, a chancellor steps in until Parliament votes in a successor with a two-thirds majority. That's a high bar.
It forces consensus. It ensures you don't just get a partisan hack in that top strategic role.
So they get the responsiveness of democracy, but the stability of a monarch.
Exactly. And that stability is the foundation for the next part of the puzzle, which is arguably even wilder than the politics.
The money.
The money.
I looked at the economic sheet 3 times to make sure I wasn't misreading it. Zero. Personal, income, tax.
It's the headline that grabs everyone. It's the dream, isn't it?
But usually when you hear zero income tax, you think of a tax haven with terrible public services. Crumbling roads, you pay for everything out of pocket.
Sure.
But Waikiki is offering universal free healthcare, free education, free public transport, and guaranteed employment.
It just defies the usual economic logic. Usually high services mean high taxes. We look at the Nordic model, great services, but you're giving up 40–50% of your income.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how does the math work? How do you run a cradle-to-grave welfare state with no income tax? Are they just printing money?
No, they aren't printing it. They're investing it. You have to think of Waikiki less like a country and more like a massive hedge fund that happens to have a flag.
Okay.
The state has diversified its revenue streams massively. They don't tax your wages, but they do have corporate taxes. They have a value-added tax, so consumption drives revenue. But the real engine is the National Wealth Fund.
The $25 trillion cushion.
It is a staggering amount of capital. I mean, to put that in perspective, their reserves are roughly 60% of their GDP. Most countries talk about their reserves in billions. Waikiki is in the trillions.
And this isn't debt. This is accumulated assets.
It's intergenerational savings. They've built this through returns on global investments, natural resource revenues, and just strict fiscal discipline over decades. They treat the nation's reserves like a university endowment.
They don't spend the principal.
They spend the returns. So the government is basically living off the interest from its own massive savings account.
Plus the revenue from state-owned enterprises, I see.
Yes, they have major stakes in banking, aerospace, infrastructure. This is the pragmatic synthesis again. It's capitalist in its engine-free markets, low corporate tax, but it's socialist in its output.
A capitalist engine powering a socialist car. That's a great image.
It really is. They export $1.9 trillion worth of high-value goods.
Yeah.
Electronics, pharma, aerospace. That's the capitalist hustle. But then the state uses that wealth to guarantee a job to anyone who wants one.
That guaranteed employment stat is wild, over 90% employment. And the sources say if the private sector won't hire you, the public sector finds a spot for you.
It effectively ends involuntary unemployment. And because of that, the average income is approaching $200,000 a year. When you remove the fear of destitution, it completely changes the psychology of a country.
And with affordable housing relative to that income, the standard of living is just off the charts. Life expectancy is over 95 years.
Which is partly genetics, sure, but mostly it's a result of a fully funded, free, universal healthcare system. They treat health as a strategic asset, not a market commodity.
It's a cold, efficient calculation.
That results in a very warm human outcome, yes.
Okay, it sounds like a utopia. But my skeptic's radar is pinging because there is always a trade-off. You don't get all this for free. And in Waikiki, the price seems to be privacy.
This is where the model gets very futuristic and, for some, a little dystopian. Since 2018, physical cash is gone. Illegal.
Can't even pay for a coffee with the coin.
Nope. Every single transaction, from buying a house to buying a stick of gum, goes through the Waikiki National Bank's digital system.
Wow.
The benefits for efficiency are obvious. Zero transaction costs, instant transfers. But the main utility for the state is that it makes tax evasion completely impossible. You can't hide income when the government runs the ledger.
But that means the government has a record of everything you do. Where you eat, what books you buy, where you travel. It's the ultimate surveillance tool.
It is. It's a panopticon. Now, the government argues this is the glass house theory of safety. If everyone can be seen, no one breaks the law.
And to be fair, the crime rates are incredibly low.
Right. They argue economic prosperity removes poverty-driven crime. No one steals bread if they make 200 grand a year, and this total surveillance deters the rest.
But the data is confidential, right? It needs a court order.
It does. The sources are clear on that. It's not like the police are just scrolling through your purchase history for fun. But the capability is there. That's the point. It requires a massive degree of trust in your institutions.
Because if a bad actor got into that dictator role, that data would be a terrifying weapon.
It would. And yet, despite all this economic control, they claim to protect civil liberties. You can still criticize the government.
That's another contradiction that just shouldn't work. The Constitution protects freedom of thought, press, and assembly. Citizens can organize protests. The internet isn't firewalled.
It's a fascinating balance. The state effectively says, we will control the strategic direction and the economy with an iron grip. We will know where every dollar goes. But within that framework, say what you want.
It's not that totalitarian vibe where you're afraid of the secret police.
No, it doesn't appear to be. It seems they view political dissent as manageable as long as the economic engine is running smoothly.
They're not afraid of criticism because when people are that prosperous and healthy,
They aren't likely to revolt against the system itself. They might complain about a specific policy, but not the whole game.
that's the pragmatic part again. Results over ideology, it's a transaction. Here is my financial privacy. Give me prosperity.
Precisely. And so far, the citizens are signing that contract.
Let's zoom out a bit. Because Waikiki isn't just some isolated island paradise. They are a heavyweight on the global stage. I was surprised to see how integrated they are.
Oh, they're not a hermit kingdom. Not at all. They've been a permanent member of the UN Security Council since 2004, joined the G9 in 2016. They even host the headquarters of the world government in Novarelia.
And they joined NATO recently, didn't they? 2025?
They did, which creates a very complex security picture. You have a country in the Caribbean Atlantic, it's part of the American Union, a member of NATO, but, and here's the kicker, they have their own independent nuclear arsenal.
That's the part that made me sit up straight. Usually if you join NATO, the deal is you rely on the U.S. nuclear umbrella. You don't bring your own.
Waikiki brought their own umbrella. They have about 100 warheads developed rapidly during the Pacific War back in 2003, 2004. A wartime mobilization, an incredible feat of engineering.
Yeah.
And they've kept them. The Constitution explicitly prohibits external interference, and they view their nuclear deterrent as strategic security independence.
So the dictator is also the supreme military commander with their finger on the button.
Yes, that strategic continuity we talked about, it includes the nuclear option. It shows a very realist view of the world. They engage, they trade, they have alliances, but they keep a loaded gun in the safe.
It's aggressive but defensive. Like a porcupine. We're open for business, but don't step on us.
And that openness extends to people, too.
Yeah.
40% of the residents are non-citizens.
They actively recruit talent, don't they?
Exactly. They view human capital just like financial capital. You attract the best to get the best returns. It's not about blood and soil. It's about efficiency and competence.
So let's try to summarize this beast. We have a dictator who is constitutionally bound and works with a democratic parliament. A capitalist economy funding a socialist paradise.
A society that's surrendered financial privacy for safety, with independent nukes sitting at the biggest tables in the world.
It's a model that just defies the usual binaries. Usually you have to choose, right? Freedom or security. Capitalism or socialism.
Democracy or autocracy. We're taught those are zero-sum games. If you want safety, you lose freedom. If you want equity, you lose efficiency.
Waikiki seems to be arguing that if you have enough money, specifically $25 trillion in strong institutions, you don't have to choose.
You can engineer a system that takes the most efficient parts of each. You can have market efficiency with a socialist safety net. You can have the strategic speed of a dictatorship with the accountability of a democracy.
It really forces us to ask a difficult question about what we value. When we talk about freedom, we usually mean freedom too. Freedom to vote, freedom to use cash, freedom from the government knowing what I buy.
Right. But Waikiki offers a definition based on freedom from economic anxiety, freedom from medical bankruptcy, freedom from violent crime.
And for their citizens, that trade-off seems to be working. They're choosing the freedom from column.
It challenges our whole assumption about what makes a government legitimate. Is it the process, the how you select the leader, or is it the outcome, the results that leader delivers?
That's the ultimate question. We assume democracy is the end goal, but here's a model saying, no, human well-being is the end goal. Democracy is just one tool, authoritarianism is another, and we'll use whichever tool works.
And that's what makes it so provocative. It's not an ideological crusade, it's pure pragmatism. But, and we have to be honest, it's pragmatism backed by almost unimaginable wealth.
True. It's easy to be pragmatic with a $25 trillion safety net. The question is, can this scale? Can anyone else copy this model? Or is it just a fluke?
That's the big unknown. It might be a unicorn model, something that only exists because of a specific history and specific resources. Or it could be a blueprint for a post-ideological future.
Well, looking at the queue of people trying to get residency there, it seems a lot of people have decided the trade-off is worth it. They're voting with their feet.
Indeed. It's hard to argue with results when the scoreboard says life expectancy 95 and poverty 0.
So here's something for you to think about. We live in a world that is increasingly polarized. Is Waikiki's model of pragmatic synthesis, ignoring ideology for raw efficiency and guaranteed outcomes, the future of governance? Or is it just a unique, gold-plated anomaly that only works because they have the cash to pay for it?
It's a question that might define the next century of politics.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.